So our next guest, Tim Roemer, spent 10 years at the CIA, with the last few of them assigned to the White House Situation Room during the Obama administration. He eventually came back to Arizona, where he spent the past 10 years in the state's Department of Homeland Security. He currently serves as the state's Chief Information Security Officer and Director of Homeland Security. He opens up about a wide variety of topics, including cybersecurity threats facing the state and the country, managing the crisis at the southern border, cyber warfare, cyber espionage, and towards the end gives a couple cool stories about his time at the CIA and the time in the White House. Also, you may recognize this video from our technical channel, Real Time Cyber. If you're more technically minded, I suggest checking out that channel. We hope you enjoy. Yeah, so let's go into your background a little bit. Before you came to DHS, you were at the CIA for 10 years. So what was that like?
It was an amazing experience. I would say, not to sound arrogant at all or biased in saying this, but it is the world's most premier, most powerful organization, period, around the world. The motto when you come into CIA to be an employee and you do your orientation week, they tell you, and it's on the wall right there, that your mission and your goal is to go where others cannot go and to achieve things that others cannot achieve. Everything I saw in 10 years working there, that was true. And it was only true based upon the hard work, dedication, and mission, and the brave men and women that are part of that organization. It was an honor to work for them and with them for 10 years, and they helped shape me to who I am today, and very grateful for the time and experience.
Okay. And what was it like? So you also did some time at the White House under the CIA. What was that like, and what were you doing there?
So this was an incredible experience. So of my 10 years working at CIA, my last 2, I was assigned to the White House Situation Room. Not a lot of people know this, but it's very regularly in your TV shows and movies where they have those shots of the White House Situation Room. Everybody knows the famous photo of President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and others crowded around a small table in the White House Situation Room during the Osama bin Laden operation. So it was pretty incredible to work there for 2 years. And the way the White House Situation Room works is it is made up by nonpartisan detailees that get their paychecks through their home organization. So it's not political. And the reason is they don't want politics or anything else getting in the way of good national security information. It was created in 1961 by JFK. And President Kennedy felt that after the Bay of Pigs disaster, that he was not getting good information from the Pentagon, and he wanted to create his own situation room, his own operations center there. And so being a CIA rep on my team for 2 years was incredible. You know, the experience was just very grateful for every minute that I spent there. It was really just, got my introduction to cybersecurity, to be completely candid with you. I'd worked at CIA. I knew a lot about offensive tactics. I knew a lot about nation-state threats. It was my time in the White House Situation Room that DDoS attacks, so we're talking like 2012, were really prevalent. So countries like Iran were going after American financial institutions like Bank of America. They shut down Bank of America's website for a few hours. Those were things that we needed to get up to speed on quickly. The National Security Council asked every single Situation Room duty officer that would rotate through to get a crash course on cybersecurity from the National Security Council on our days off, so that we were in a better position to advise or at least update the president, vice president, and National Security Council on anything cybersecurity related. It was that time, a decade ago exactly, that I realized that cybersecurity would be the biggest national security threat of my lifetime. And that's when I started to shift my career a little bit from I want to work in counterterrorism for the rest of my life to I really want to work in cybersecurity.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think like 10 years ago, things just weren't, they were still connected, but they weren't connected like they are today. Where, if someone wanted to come over and spy and do espionage, you had to, get on a plane, come over here, but now it's connected through the wire.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest threat with cybersecurity is, that you can be attacked by anyone, anywhere, at any time. Cybersecurity knows no borders. So I know we'll get into it a little bit more later, but that's the biggest threat right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how have some of your experiences at the White House sort of impacted your decisions here at DHS?
It's been, you have to be like a sponge, is the best way to put it. Absorb your real world experiences. We always say that real world experience is the most important thing in really preparing yourself to work in a high-paced, high-stress environment that, lives are at stake. There's no real substitute for experience. So I acted like a sponge. Being a fly on the wall for 2 years in the West Wing, you needed to be able to absorb as much as possible and learn from it. You don't always have to agree with it.
Right.
But being around to understand why decisions were made a certain way, and then coming to work for Governor Ducey and now being able to lead the Department of Homeland Security, the best part about it was now I get to truly advise on what I think should take place policy-wise in order to address these threats. Where when I was in the White House Situation Room, we were simply updating and informing. So we would let the president know that Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons on Syrian citizens today. Here's what happens. It's more factual, okay? Okay. When I came to work for Governor Ducey, now leading the Department of Homeland Security, it's great because we can take facts, like about the border, and then we can propose solutions. Mm-hmm. And I think what's great is I got to be a fly on the wall and watching the National Security Council and the President of the United States cabinet propose solutions to the president. And then now I'm able to do that at a state level within the governor's cabinet.
Okay. Wow,
Makes sense. Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's quite the change of pace.
Yeah,
it's nice to have that experience under my belt. Like I've been there at the federal, like at the national level.
Yeah.
And so I feel more prepared in order to do that for Governor Ducey.
Has there been any situations where it is that sort of pace here at DHS?
Yeah, absolutely. Border security is a good example. Cybersecurity, because we've made it such a sense of urgency, and knock on wood, I don't even want to say it, but like we'll just say, we've been fairly lucky based upon preparation on the cyber side, but it could happen at any moment. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the other thing is we know what we're up against. We're not saying we have all the answers on cybersecurity. We're not daring people to come after us. We're very complimentary of our adversaries and the hackers. We know how good they are. We know what the threat is. We know how hard we have to work in order to just stay even with them. Border security is definitely one that has had an unbelievable pace to it. Okay. And it's been extremely stressful to watch the border situation deteriorate, especially for our department where we spend a lot of time there. Our biggest stakeholders are there. We hear from them on a daily basis. Seeing them struggle with this crisis and, I'd say doing our best to help them has been the closest thing to my experience in the White House where, it was sort of almost like these days, almost always a time of war, whether it's the war on terrorism or different things happening in the world. I would say the border crisis for, what it is as real of a threat to any, to the state of Arizona as any threat is to any state in the entire country.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been meaning to ask. So in the past 2 years, there's been about 4 million illegal crossing encounters, according to CBP, across all the states that are on the border. Do you think that foreign intelligence agencies are using the current state of the border as a chance to move people north, like agents move them into the U.S.?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And to what extent?
That's the $1 million question. I mean, that will be debated, and it's tough because, one, I don't sit in those chairs in Washington anymore, and even if I did, I wouldn't be able to talk about them in a level of detail. But I will tell you, based upon my experience and based upon where I'm at now and everything that I'm seeing, it is an absolute certainty that it's happening. I look at the fact that just we had 1 month alone, I believe it was the month of May, in which on the border, 15 individuals were apprehended that we know about that were on the terrorist watch list. Now, that's just from a terrorist watch list perspective. You can only imagine that if you're an adversary of ours and you want to bring in your spies into the country, it's very easy to do across the southern border, candidly, because so we saw over 2 million apprehensions this federal fiscal year. The gotaways, the individuals that we know at least were tracked somewhere but were never caught, is upwards in certain border sectors is upwards of 50%. So you're looking at a very high number of individuals that have been able to come into the country that we don't know about. It's only logical and complete common sense to think that our adversaries have used that border crisis and the continued border crisis to do all kinds of nefarious acts, which is extremely concerning and alarming. I think we will only find out the horrible repercussions of the border crisis as time goes on. Only time will tell. But I'm very nervous and very scared about it. That's why I've been so proud to be part of Governor Ducey's border security team and taking action where the federal government has let us down. We've stepped up. And we've shown our citizens, we've shown our ranchers, our agriculture community on the border and others that we're willing to protect them, and we're willing to step up and stand up to the current administration. It's not easy. It's extremely costly. But we believe that it's the price worth willing to pay to protect Arizonans. It's protecting them of dangerous fentanyl overdoses. It's protecting them from dangerous car pursuits and vehicle chases and things like that with human smugglers. And so it's, I could talk all day about the border crisis, but it's 100% a real crisis that's going to affect us for many years to come, unfortunately.
So let's shift a little bit into, I know you've talked quite a bit about some of the threats of cyber warfare and cyber espionage. From working at the CIA for the past, from working at the CIA for a decade and then working in DHS here for about the past decade, how have you seen the cyber threats shift and proliferate?
It's gone up exponentially. We're at a constant attack all day, every day, based upon, the global, clocks, if you will. Attackers are after us most when it's nighttime here, when it's weekends here, when it's holidays here. They know exactly what they're doing, but we've seen a huge increase in the number of attacks. And we've seen, what's really alarming, we've seen a lot of successful attacks against our local governments in Arizona, whether it's, Flagstaff Unified School District getting hit with ransomware, taking them, completely out of school for a couple days, or whether it's the city of Kingman and others that have gotten hit. We've seen an alarming rate of our local governments get hit. And that's why Governor Ducey showed us incredible leadership in giving the state of Arizona $10 million for a grant program in order for our department to give the same cybersecurity tools that we use to protect the state and all of our citizens' data, to give it to locals. So now we've got $10 million to spend on advanced endpoint protection, web application firewalls, even cybersecurity awareness training and phishing tools. Those are things that a lot of local municipalities didn't have money for. And we're arming them up and we're helping them fight back against these modern threats with real solutions. It's no longer let's come in and give you a threat briefing and scare you. Yeah. That's great and all, but if you scare a city and their mayor still doesn't increase their budget, then it didn't really do them any good. So what we said is we will actually deliver the tools to you, and we've seen incredible feedback. I think it should be a nationwide model on how to do this. The federal government has stepped up with money. $1 billion in the transportation infrastructure bill that passed for IIJA. But what does $1 billion mean to a state like Arizona? It means that we got $3.3 million this year. Of the $3.3 million, the state of Arizona can only apply for 20%. 80% has to go to the locals. There's also all kinds of matches that have to take place. There's loops you have to jump through. The state of Arizona did it the right way, which is that we're actually going to get the tools directly to you through our department, and we're not going to mess around with all the nuances.
Okay.
With all the tools that you guys did provide, do you feel that the different organizations were prepared to use them? I know a lot of companies are sort of struggling to get IT help and cyber help.
You're absolutely right. So we anticipated that based upon the current grant program that we were already running. We were able to bring in, with the governor's approval, with the $10 million, we brought in 2 FTEs to our department to help facilitate the tools for the locals to make sure that they would work. Yeah, because we knew that,
Yeah.
you can't just, you can give a small municipality a really fancy new tool. It doesn't mean that, give somebody a Ferrari. It doesn't know that they're going to know how to drive it, type of a thing. I know I wouldn't.
Yeah. If you give me one I can figure out.
Yeah, exactly. I would be happy to figure it out for you. Yeah. But yeah, so we anticipated that. It's a great question.
Okay.
So, coming from private sector security, it typically has been very hard to measure and quantify the return on investment, whether you're putting in like a specific security control or implementing a security program. How has the state government done that? I'm sure there's probably some strings attached to the money and they want to see some sort of return.
Yeah, well, so like what we do is, we work for a fantastic leader in Governor Ducey. He's very metrics driven. And so we use risk scores, vulnerability scores, all different types of metrics to track our progress. We like to see the same things out of the individuals using our tools as well. So when we give them remote patching and an inventory management, we want to see how many threats they've remedied, how many patches have you put out. Of those patches, how many vulnerabilities were covered. Those are the types of things that we look for in showing the proof of value.
That's awesome. What sort of improvements have you seen overall from the state with tool implementations?
It's brand new within the local governments, but we hope to see the same success with them that we saw on our end. And what we saw on our end was when we first upgraded our inventory management remote patching capability tools, which was really next generation, a total game changer for us. We saw that we were able to patch and remediate more vulnerabilities in a 72-hour push than we had in, I think, the previous 3 months prior to that 72-hour push.
Oh, wow.
We took care of over 750,000 vulnerabilities in 72 hours by
and that's
automating
with mitigation as well?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
We almost at the time didn't want to talk publicly about it because we were thinking, man, look how we're showing how many vulnerabilities we have. And then we realized everybody has that many vulnerabilities. They just don't know about it. We actually took the initiative proactively to find out how many we had and then actually remedy them.
Okay.
What were the biggest vulnerabilities? Like configurations, patching software?
All of the above, and it changes every single day, so you have to do it constantly. It's like a credit score, right? So we have risk scores, and if somebody thinks they've got a really good risk score at a state agency today, they can't brag about it too much because you could say, oh, I'm in the 800s, look at how great I am, and tomorrow that one vulnerability that you had that was rated low, low threat level has now been weaponized and is now at a critical vulnerability, and you haven't patched it yet, and now you watch your score go down to like a 600 and you've got to patch. We see that happen all the time where agencies will say, oh my God, how did my score go down so fast? And we show them that based upon the scannings and the assessments and how these vulnerabilities work in the ranking systems, things can change very quickly. So it takes 24/7, 365. Cybersecurity, you can't take any holidays.
Yeah, wow.
Exactly. That's awesome.
So let's shift back a little bit into some of the threats. Specifically, let's touch on the ones obviously the election just happened. What kind of threats were you seeing from outside governments and outside threat actors before the election?
We didn't really see an uptick or a change in the attacks coming in, which is a good thing. We were prepared. We always say you prepare for the worst, hope for the best, but because hope isn't a strategy, you better put that preparation and time in. A lot of tabletop exercises, working with all 15 counties and the Secretary of State's office and the governor's office and the legislature and anybody that would work with us, law enforcement agencies, federal partners, you name it. We've really improved our relationship and our coalitions and collaborations that we've brought in. Fortunately, we didn't see like an uptick, but that's because we put in a lot of hard work. It wasn't by accident. We knew that you protect an election by protecting every day of the year for those organizations I just listed. You can't just show up and say, I'm going to help protect you on election day. That's not how somebody comes after them. They don't come after them on election day. They will, in addition to what they've been trying to do the other 364 days over the course of the year, but they're looking for a way in and they're looking to exploit it on election day or around election day. It took a lot of hard work and dedication. I think I'm extremely proud of the professionals at the 15 counties, at the Secretary of State's office, and others that really did a phenomenal job to ensure that election day ran smoothly.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. What about some of the threats to some of the state governments as far as data breaches goes? I know there were a few earlier this year. They were Chinese-sponsored. What do you think, why are they targeting state governments? And what have those threats looked like over the course of the year?
One, they'll target any government organization, across the country. It's all fair game, if you will, from their perspective. Unfortunately, that's why you have to be prepared for it. I remember when the U.S. had the General Soleimani missile strike. We were warned and we were prepared for an increase of cyber attacks from Iran, and a lot of people thought, well, they're not going to come after like a local government. They're only going to come after the federal government. And we said, no, like everything that we're sensing, everything that we're seeing, that's not true. They're absolutely 100% coming after us. Well, they defaced the Texas Department of Agriculture website with a pro-Iranian message. I don't think there's any better example that a nation states will do just about anything. Where there's a vulnerability, they want to expose it. They use it for propaganda, rhetoric, to prove a point, any number of things. So even if they think I can't influence the outcome of an election or a vote or something like that, they can influence the perception. And perception is reality. So if they can disrupt the integrity of the democracy and they can spread that discourse, that's where you're in trouble. So you can't even allow them in to deface a website. Defacing a website doesn't change a vote, for example, but it gives the perception to our citizens that something happened. So what we always have to be on guard for is you got to take care of everything, right? You got to take care of everything from web application firewalls to protecting your websites so they don't get defaced, and then you got to protect your actual data and advanced endpoint protection. And that's why we've had to invest a significant amount of money in the state of Arizona over the last several years in order to protect citizens' data, because it's really what's attractive, not just nation states, but criminals. So it's the criminal networks that are mostly after our data because they can sell it for so much in the black market. So we know that these criminal organizations around the world are profiting billions of dollars every year on ransomware. They want our citizens' data, tax return, PII, even your driver's license, any number of things they can get their hands on to profit from it.
Okay.
Where do you think some of the biggest threats are coming from? Is it China, Russia, North Korea? Who do you think our biggest threat
all
is?
those. I mean, all of our adversaries are coming after us. Then those criminal networks within those countries. So Russian criminal groups are a huge threat. I would argue that they are tied to the government, but you can debate about it. At the end of the day, is they're bad guys. I always say cybersecurity is about good versus evil. It's good guys versus bad guys. Sometimes I don't necessarily care who it is. I just care about protecting the state of Arizona. So it's up to our federal partners. We share information and intelligence regularly. We've got great working relationship with our federal partners. That's DHS, CISA, and FBI, amongst others, even Secret Service. We share a lot of information and things that we're seeing with them so that they can build cases. We don't want to just thwart an attack or see an attack coming in and say, oh, phew, we got lucky, we blocked that one, or we got away with that one. No, we need to package that up with a red bow on top and share it with our federal partners so they can add it to their intelligence, their larger investigations, their overall threat landscape and threat picture of the totality of the circumstance. So we try to operate as good partners. It's up to those federal partners because we don't have the time, the resources, or the expertise here to figure out who it was or why they were doing it. We just know we defended the state of Arizona. It's up to our federal partners to look at the larger situation.
Okay. So to sort of piggyback off of that, do you think that, with the war going on in Ukraine right now, do you think with vigilantism, Anonymous, Fancy Bear, some of the smaller hacking groups, do you think that any sort of adverse consequences are going to come out of that from smaller groups hacking governments or hacking states and then blaming it back on the country?
Yeah, like an unintended escalation.
Very likely.
Okay.
There's always the unintended consequences, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy how we've done a little bit of a 180 where we went from being on the defensive, and I think we always are, of hacktivists like Anonymous. But then Anonymous brought a cyber war against Russia during the invasion in Ukraine and made Russia go on the defensive so that they haven't really been able to go as much on the offensive as probably as much as they've liked. Make no mistake about it, it's made a big impact on that war, on the escalation, on all of it. I can't applaud it though, because if I applauded it, it would be saying that it's okay, what they do in all these other situations. I'll just tell you that it's had a significant it's had a significant impact. I just don't want to be on the receiving end of it someday as well, because the bottom line is they're good. They're very good. It's a very scary situation if they come after you. I think they've proven that. I think it'll be kind of a little fascinating to see how the nation states, how some of our adversaries deal with the hacktivists, though. I think is going to be kind of interesting because there's likely that some of those hacktivists are located within some of those countries as well. So, it's they're very it's a very risky game. Cybersecurity is not, if people out there think cybersecurity is the type of, if it's a type of game or it's a digital problem or it's a virtual problem, they're wrong. There are physical consequences to this crime, and those that partake in it are going to be held accountable I think of the United States, we hold people accountable through the rule of law. Some of our adversaries don't necessarily follow the same, freedoms and luxuries and judicial system.
You don't say.
No, yeah, exactly. I feel like it could really escalate quickly. But cyber is it's the war. People are saying it's the war of the future, and it's not. I say it's the modern war now. It's just only going to escalate in the future. So sure, some of those unintended consequences, things like that. We talked a little bit at the beginning of the podcast about my experience, and I talked about needing to be a sponge and absorb.
Yeah.
I think everybody in cybersecurity needs to learn from everything that's happening every day. My team, I preach this all the time. Pay attention to what's happening in the news. Pay attention to what's happening in all of our feeds. You can never have too much information. Learn from it. Learn why somebody went down, how to prevent it, how to protect ourselves. Learn what somebody else is doing. We need to really be watching everything that's happening on a global level like a hawk right now. And really better preparing our states and our nation for how to prevent it from succeeding here.
It's a great sales pitch for real-time cyber.
Happy.
Exactly.
Look, like I said earlier, it's good versus evil. So what I love about this topic is it's where cybersecurity is this area where public sector and private sector can work so well together. The public sector really needs the private sector to be developing tools and solutions and innovations for us to be able to use to then turn around and protect all of our citizens' data. So we've got 7.5 million Arizonans' data that we have to protect. But do you think we do it with tools generated by government in-house? Absolutely not. We're constantly trying to find new partners, new vendors, new innovative solutions to be able to do it. But it's a fluid situation, so we need the private sector to continue to be able to develop those tools. Otherwise, we will get hit.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about some of the threats to critical infrastructure. So over the past few years, we've kind of been following the Department of Energy's annual disturbance reports. It seems like cyber events, there's a few that they've spelled out in more detail, but it seems like cyber events have been becoming more common. Who do you think is carrying out those cyber attacks, and what are their goals? Are they just probing? Are they potentially planning backdoors for later?
Both, and I think they're preparing for when an all-out war happens, what they're prepared to do and where their successes will be. It's like a trial run, if you will. I think they're practicing for game day, and I'm very nervous about when game day comes. So that's why we have to learn from those situations. So, a lot of U.S. private sector, even the government, have come out in certain hacks and said, hey, we know it's this nation state, or we know it's this criminal group. Okay, well, we know they're all the same. So again, it's Russian criminal groups, it's the Russian government, it's the Chinese government, it's Iran, it's North Korea, it's different organizations. It's all of the above, but I think they're doing it to actually practice for when they need to do it in like a time of war. And I think we've seen that play out in Ukraine as well. They need to figure out how to go after the power grid and the water and things like that in order to win a physical kinetic war on the ground as well.
Okay. Yeah. Little dark there.
Yeah, well, it's happening. It's happening every day in Ukraine. So yeah, we've got to learn from it.
What about? So there's also been I know in Florida, I think it was last year in Oldsmar, Florida, they had a potential attack on the water supply. They tried to poison the water. There was a couple other across the country that were a little bit less successful, as well as there's been some in Israel and other countries. Who do you think's behind those? And it seems, that would be an act of war if you poison the water.
I think it should be, and this is a part where we need to hold those accountable that are doing this, which is easier said than done. I'm not naive. I get it. But we've got to figure out a way to hold those accountable and to find that gets into our capabilities and ability to figure out who's doing it with good tools, good intelligence, all those different types of things. I believe the Colonial Pipeline, and I'm gonna do this off the top of my head. It's been a busy year, but I think those were Russian criminal organizations that the United States government even said were responsible for those. I believe the Florida Water Treatment Facility was as well, but I could be wrong. But for all intents and purposes, likely criminal organizations with maybe some ties to nation states. Again, not to be naive, if you think all these criminal organizations are operating in those countries without those countries telling them what to do ever, I think as a off base. So yeah, it's extremely concerning. So especially for the state of Arizona, our biggest vulnerability. I don't want to call it a vulnerability. I mean, what's most important to us, I mean, it's no secret we live in the middle of the desert. We're in the middle of a drought. When it comes to critical infrastructure, the most important thing for us is protecting our water supply. We drilled on this as our number one priority for the last many years. So we have to learn from those situations like what happened to that Florida water treatment facility.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, you've mentioned, too, in the past, regarding the war in Ukraine, that Russia really hasn't met their military objectives, and now they're more likely than ever to come after us. How do you see that playing out?
Boy, not that I have a crystal ball. I will just say on the front
If you
end
do,
of
can
that,
I borrow it?
I know, yeah, exactly. If I did have a crystal ball, I'd be using it for a lot of different reasons. This would be maybe one of them. Look, it's no secret. It's not even debatable that Russia has not achieved their military objectives in Ukraine. I think what's most dangerous is, judging from history, is that once a nation has committed to a war, that all bets are off. Mm-hmm. And when things don't go their way, it continues to escalate. So what I get really frustrated with is when people in the media or just people in the cybersecurity world say, the Russian cyber war that wasn't. It's like we're still in the middle of this thing and they're already declaring a victory, which is completely wrong. I think it's more likely, as things don't go Russia's way on the ground, that they turn to cyber. Mm-hmm. It's because they'll look for a win. When you lose in one area, you try to offset it with a win in another area. They need it to look strong. They need it for the faith and confidence of their own citizens and their people behind that regime. And I think it's likely that they would go the route of a full-scale cyber attack against the West and our allies. It could be, they could say it's in retaliation for economic sanctions, but likely it will be a way of them trying to get an upper hand and to lash out and to strike back. So I think every day that goes by, we become more and more of a target, to be completely candid with you, and we need to be preparing with a sense of urgency to be able to fight back and defend against it.
If we did go to cyber war, do you think Arizona would be prepared to defend itself?
As much as any other state is. I've used the example of Red Dawn, the movie.
Yeah.
Would you expect the Arizona National Guard to defend the state of Russian, forces landing, on our border with Mexico? Does a common citizen expect that the state of Arizona can withhold the Russian military from entering the state? Probably not.
Right.
That's why cybersecurity is so unique. We as a society expect our states, our cities, our counties to protect against nation states, but we're literally states going up against nation states. Right. It's extremely difficult. I would say that I am proud of the state of Arizona. I'm proud of the leadership of Governor Ducey. I'm proud of our proactive efforts. I think that we are ahead, but that by no means means that we can't get hit just like anybody else, because the threat is so grave. And there's no such thing as 100% security, especially we've talked about. There is no borders and all these different types of things. So it would be extremely difficult. Right. Let's say that. I mean, if a nation state is going to come after states, it's a tough fight, nation states against nation states alone. And again, I use that example of Red Dawn because it shows how difficult it is. I don't know why people think just because it's cyber, it's any different. 100 people going up against an entire country, can be defeated. It's like David versus Goliath. So it's extremely alarming. That's why we have to continue to work every single day across all 50 states. But it needs investment. I think talk is so cheap. We're fortunate that we've put real money to it. We've actually upgraded tools. We've taken action. There are too many states that I worry about because I look around and it's almost like they're waiting for the bad day to happen in order to invest in it. What we did in the state of Arizona is we created a task force, and I told the task force years ago that Governor Ducey created, let's look at every major cyber incident that happened around the country. Let's look at their task force after the fact, and let's just do what they did after the major cyber data breach in order to prevent it from happening. Okay. So it was all about, we're going to invest this much money, we're going to put this team together, we're going to change these policies. And I said, well, let's just do it. Well, we don't have to wait for the bad day to come before we do something about it.
Absolutely.
Okay, interesting. So I think that's a good segue. Arizona is, I know you've mentioned this before, unique in the sense that not many states right now have cybersecurity under DHS. I know the federal government made that move not too long ago. How has that changed things? What do you think the advantages are to that?
This huge advantage of having your cyber team co-located with law enforcement from around the state, from having a credibility factor of being underneath a security agency to get your other state agencies to kind of get in line and pay attention as a priority. It's symbolic of being a priority in your state. When the governor says things like cybersecurity is Homeland Security, it helps my team achieve their mission objectives because it gives them the backing of not just the governor's office, but it gives them the backing of our chief executive of the state, of the governor himself. When he goes to a ribbon cutting at our cyber command center, when he's behind us, when he's supporting us, my team is in a better position to do their jobs because of his support, both symbolically and financially.
Yeah.
And then there's the actual resource of being in a better facility to do the job. So one of the big impacts has been we moved out of an IT administrative agency and we moved into a state fusion center. And state fusion centers around the country are funded by a lot of Homeland Security funding, but it's a fusion between federal law enforcement, local and state law enforcement, and it helps you be under one roof in order to prevent and respond to all threats. What we're saying is cybersecurity is a significant threat to the state of Arizona, just like any other Homeland Security issue is. Our cyber team should be co-located with those individuals that are helping to secure the Super Bowl, helping to secure the Phoenix Open, helping to secure the border, and all the other day-to-day things happening.
Yeah.
Okay. So, before we move on, I forgot to ask one question about some of the threats. We've talked a lot about Russia, but it seems like we're kind of entering into kind of a Cold War-like era with China, which I obviously can't predict the future. But it certainly seems right. How do you think cyber will play into that?
Significantly. They're just after different things for the most part, and China is mainly after a lot of intellectual property. They're going after our research institutions. So within the state of Arizona, they want the research that we've worked really hard to gather, from Arizona State University to University of Arizona and others. There's a huge threat from China to try to steal that data after our defense contractors, after our chip manufacturers. Chip manufacturing and securing the supply chain of those essential tools is our entire future, and it's part of our national security. So not just the United States getting chip manufacturing here with companies like TSMC, but the fact that most of those microchip manufacturers are actually coming to the greater Phoenix area. It shows that we are prospering here, and it's a great thing, but it's also a huge threat, and we need to act accordingly in order to secure it from a supply chain perspective, intelligence, cybersecurity, foreign espionage, counterintelligence, you name it, the full gamut of all the national security issues, just like a spy game, Jack Ryan, you name the movie, but it's taking place in reality currently in places like Arizona, and it's a huge threat. It's something that, yes, it's concerning, but it's at least welcomed the fact that I think we're headed in the right direction. I think it's a huge compliment to the United States, a lot of elected officials and leaders and commerce officials that have helped bring microchip manufacturing here, but it doesn't come without a little bit of a risk as well. So we've been hard at work working with federal, state, locals, and with those companies in the private sector to kind of do everything we can to help secure them. But yeah, China's really after the supply chains, your intellectual property, and things like that. So they're just a little more quiet about doing it, but the same level of concern.
Yeah, as I saw, I think of Mandiant, they produced a list of all the APTs, just based off like tactics and techniques. I think they had around like 20 that were specifically targeting intellectual property, a lot in the military industrial base too.
Yeah, well, companies like Raytheon Missile Systems and things like that here, Intel and others. The threat is certainly there. So you can't just focus on one nation state threat. I mean, that's why I always say it doesn't matter who the bad guy is. It's a bad guy, so be prepared for it.
Where do you think TikTok sort of plays into that?
Is it a Chinese spy app? Chinese Communist Party spy app?
I do believe that it is a Chinese spy tool. I feel pretty passionately and pretty strongly about it that people should be very cautious about downloading it. I mean, it's not something I recommend. It's not something that I would have on my devices, or I wouldn't want on my employee devices or my family's devices. It's actually pretty simple when it comes down to it. If the Chinese government is a communist government. There is no capitalism. I mean, they try to put this front that it is, but it's not. So TikTok can say all day long that they're siloed off or they're free of the Chinese government, but the reality, the cold hard facts is they're not. Nothing in China is. China's government controls everything, and that's why you need to be cognizant of that. And giving a Chinese company access to your device by allowing the apps to be downloaded, I mean, you're doing the work for them. I mean, you don't need a phishing email to go after somebody if they've already downloaded TikTok on their phone. What I worry is that the government of China will go after those individuals on their personal devices to get into their work accounts, because passwords can be the same, blackmail will exist, all kinds of different things can take place. So it's extremely alarming. I like the progress that the United States government has taken on these topics. I mean, as we discussed prior to taping this, the FCC coming out unanimously in support of not allowing Chinese telecommunications companies equipment to be able to come into the country. Companies like Huawei, it's a huge step in the right direction for the government coming in and intervening in a national security capacity to help protect our citizens.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a very easy backdoor in a lot of critical infrastructure, whether it's 5G or communications.
And look, I am not a technical person by nature. I don't have a hacking background. However, I like to think that I surround myself with people that are smarter than me. And I've got a lot of smart people that have been around me for quite some time, people that I trust, confirming my initial beliefs that the threat is very much there and not to be using it.
Yeah, that's...
Just gonna take my dance videos off, huh?
Use Instagram.
I've never used TikTok. I've been very against it.
Yeah. The thing with TikTok is, like, it's not like there aren't other options, right? I think people are just being a little stubborn here. I think safety, I just don't think the risk is worth the reward on it. Exactly. There are other social media companies that you can utilize for almost the exact same service.
Yeah, I've never used TikTok, but one thing that does worry me is, so, like, most of those social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, all of them do it too. So they basically offer some of the code for developers basically to pull and reuse. So I always wonder, like, how much code is from TikTok that's just in apps that we don't even know about, where it's
Probably
still
a lot.
basically doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
a lot of companies would use it for like analytics and stuff like that. So if you submit ads and you click on it, the companies will be able to see sort of where the traffic came from.
Yeah, because I know the federal government started requiring like a software bill of materials. They want to know everything that's in that. But they recently, I think it was the other day, they found a Russian company had a bunch of code that was being used by apps. I think it's CDC and U.S. Army, actually.
Oh, I believe it.
It's frightening.
It is. Look, I mean, we already have so many threats to keep us up at night. Why are we voluntarily going to take one hand and tie it behind our backs by giving access to something that is highly debatable on whether or not it's safe or not? Let's just make a good, safe decision here and not use it.
Makes sense.
So, kind of pivot, let's talk about some of the cybersecurity laws. I know you've talked about in the past working with the state legislator to generally expand upon some of the breach disclosure laws. So since those laws have been passed, what kind of difference in metrics have you seen?
This was a huge push of ours, just so that listeners know. Our data breach notification law in statute had that you had to notify the Attorney General's office, but our state cyber command team within the Department of Homeland Security is really the most appropriate agency that needs to learn from the incident in order to better protect all Arizonans' data. So we agreed that the Attorney General's office, of course, should be alerted, and we work really well with them. But in statute, we wanted to make sure that our department was listed as well. So that was our most significant accomplishment recently, which helps put us in a better position because now there's the statutory requirement to notify the Attorney General's office and our Department of Homeland Security. And so the Attorney General's office will, want to know about this for a number of different reasons, a lot of them legal. We want to know about them because we want to help better protect all Arizonans data from the same attack. So if one organization gets hit, we need to know about it so we can better protect all Arizonans. And that's why that was a significant step in the right direction. Very minor in statute, like very easy change, but significant, advancements for our team to be able to see those types of things.
Okay. What about some of the laws? I know, like, our neighbors up north in Utah have passed affirmative defense laws, which basically, if you implement some sort of gold standard of security like NIST or ISO, they'll shield you from some of the liability if you do have a breach. What's your view on those? And do you see that ever being something in Arizona?
I don't know. It's part of the future conversation. I think it's been a little bit of baby steps right now. What you have to do in government is, when it comes to these things and doing it at the state level, is work really well with your private sector and work well with like for us, the Chamber of Commerce here within the state of Arizona and all the local chambers of commerce and all those, because there's a lot of concerns and the effects and unintended consequences and things like that. We don't want to over-regulate. We don't want to overly burden. But at the same time, we want to prioritize security. But we've already talked multiple times about unintended consequences. I think some states take too big of a step. They have really good intentions when they do it, but the outcomes are very restrictive within the business community, and those unintended consequences end up hurting more than what the outcomes will actually help them for. I think a lot of it can be done on a voluntary basis. I even had a little bit of a battle that I didn't fight directly, but I was generally supportive of saying, you shouldn't be able to use government funds to pay ransoms, because I don't agree in paying ransoms. And that ultimately didn't end up going through, because a lot of people thought, whether it's life and death or it's during the pandemic and it's a hospital that's hit and all these different types of things, you start seeing that you can have really good intentions about you shouldn't be paying ransoms, but as soon as you put it in law, now all of a sudden you are literally preventing it from happening. Now it's on you. And so you need to figure out ways that you can effectively work with all parties involved to do the same good and get the same outcome without having the unintended consequences along the way.
What do you think about, I got a question for you. So what do you think private companies are doing with sort of the balance between actually putting cybersecurity protections in place, or just relying on insurance to cover the whole bill if they do have ransom or if they do get hacked?
Some are better than others. There's no guarantee across the board. I will tell you that with insurance premiums going through the roof on cybersecurity coverage, I think many of the companies, even if they were relying heavily on the insurance side of it, are now having to say, we can't afford that anymore. We need to put money back in on the proactive side. Okay. I'm actually completely okay with that. I think one positive silver lining of insurance premiums going up so much in cybersecurity is it's making people rethink where the money is best spent. I've been an advocate for this for many years, that your money, if you only get $1 million, let's say a nice round number, on cybersecurity, you can't put it towards your insurance. You need to put it towards proactive tools, because if you put it all towards insurance, you're really going to need the insurance because you didn't do anything to prevent it from happening. Think about it like this. If you have a budget and you have a car budget, and your entire budget is your car insurance, but you didn't budget any money for maintenance, routine maintenance, or anything else, you're going to need the car insurance, because you're going to break down on the freeway, 10,000 miles, whatever it is, into it, because you haven't rotated your tires, there's not enough air in them, you're going to have a blowout, you haven't changed your oil, you haven't had any of the basic checkups. Cybersecurity is the same way. It's risk. So if you're not doing all the different types of cyber hygiene type things throughout the year, you're really going to need the insurance. And when our premiums went up, we were having all these emergency meetings within the state of Arizona trying to figure out how we're going to pay the premiums. And I said, to be completely candid with everybody in the room, I said, give me more money to actually prevent the emergency, and we've got a better chance of not needing the insurance. And then there's a second silver lining to this. When you invest money on the front end proactively on cybersecurity, your insurance companies see it, and it actually drives down your premiums. Okay. What I've seen, and I think this needs to happen more often, is the insurance companies need to have a better sense of looking at your risk vulnerabilities, where you've invested, the tools you have in place, NIST controls, and they should be bringing down your insurance coverage based upon good work going in on the front end. I remember, when I was in high school, that you got a good student discount. If you were a high school student, you were on your parents' car insurance, but you were a good student. It's like, okay, let's have a good cybersecurity CISO discount type of a thing. I think that's where it needs to happen. But I'm not shy about saying that in limited budgets, everybody has a limited budget. Nobody has, money growing on trees anywhere. I would be putting more money into the preventative side than the insurance side. I'm just being, completely candid.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
So one thing that you've mentioned a lot about is creating a culture of cybersecurity in Arizona, which I think has been evident over the past few years. Which I think that's a big challenge for a lot of companies. Especially I think a lot of employees, they don't really understand cybersecurity. It's pretty abstract to them. Especially when you start talking about MFA and all these things, they seem just to fall asleep. How have you created
Shocking. Wait, what? Somebody fell asleep talking about MFA?
If you were still
Director Jen Easterly would be so upset right now.
So how have you created with those challenges, how have you created a cybersecurity culture?
Yeah, so I laugh about this because it's real, and you can either laugh or cry, so I choose to laugh. People have the shortest attention spans. If you think you're going to create a culture of cybersecurity awareness, which I wanted to create at day one, 3.5 years ago, of becoming CISO, because I understood that my employees were the weakest link. It's not to offend my state employees, 36,000 of them. I know my human nature is my weakest link as well. We wanted to create this culture, but you can't just create a culture by doing a 45-minute training episode a year. Look, we got the governor to mandate annual statewide cybersecurity awareness training, which is great, and every organization should have that. But that's the very, very beginning. That's low-hanging fruit, right? You're going to start fishing your employees more. We were fishing our employees like once a year. We do it every month now at the highest difficulty level. Wow. Those are like the steps. Now you're getting into a more of creating a culture because you're getting your employees to start thinking about cybersecurity, not just on a yearly basis, but on a monthly basis. But again, we have very short attention spans. We needed to change the culture by saying a couple different things. One, I felt like you only get dinged when you do something wrong in cybersecurity as an employee, you never get rewarded. So we started a very small but effective positive reinforcement campaign where we started giving out goldfish crackers, Swedish fish candy to people who did a good job or found real phishing emails. You think it sounds silly and it wouldn't make an impact. I can tell you we had an assistant director at the Department of Administration at the time, pre-pandemic, who caught a real phishing email after 6 months or so of this new culture kind of taking place. My team brought him Swedish fish candy to his office, and he came by later that day and he said, "You guys just made my day. I'm having a stressful day. I'm having a horrible day. That phishing email stressed me out even more. I haven't had time for lunch. You guys bring by candy and crackers, and at least now, you know what, I kind of put a smile on my face, because I love these Swedish fish candy, type of a thing." So we started with some positive reinforcement. I will tell you a funny story about this. I had what I thought was this brilliant idea that we would, and I got this idea at the Department of Revenue, walking around the Department of Revenue doing the same campaign. And we said, "Thanks for saving us a Bitcoin for preventing ransomware." And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get those chocolate covered.
Only charging one Bitcoin these days?
Yeah, right? Chocolate covered gold coins, and I'm going to reward them for saving us Bitcoin because it's going to be funny, it's cliche, it's all corny and cheesy, all those great things. Well, I'll tell you, it's not that brilliant. One, they melt in Arizona very easily. They don't travel well. Two, they don't taste good. So I went to an event at the Department of Economic Security and rewarded them with all these things. We put them at the table and their cyber team and some of their employees. I said, "Thanks for being at the time we said, you guys have been the model agency, our largest agency. You've been the model agency of how to partner and collaborate and use all of our enterprise security tools in the state of Arizona." And I had at least 4 or 5 people come up to me on the way out the door, said, "Hey, do you have any more of the Swedish fish? I don't really want these chocolate covered gold things." And I came back to my team and I said, "Note to everybody, buy more Swedish fish. They're really popular. We don't need the chocolate anymore.
Just a bowl of mush.
Maybe buy some goldfish crackers." I laugh about it, but that's part of the culture. We wanted to start rewarding the good behavior, not just slapping you on the hand for the bad behavior. We wanted people feeling like they were part of our cybersecurity team. So we've done more events for employees. We've done more outreach. I've done meme contests because we get tired of making the memes. We love making them, but it's always us making them. We love when we're on our like monthly update calls with information security officers around the state or IT leaders around the state, and we'll have fresh, memes on cyber. I don't care how short your attention span is. You can visually look at a meme and read it in 2 to 3 seconds and get a point across about why your password security matters, why clicking on phishing emails matters, why MFA, matters. So meme contests, short videos, all those different types of things. We've tried to be more creative and fun with the topic in order for our employees to start paying attention to it more often. And it has paid off huge dividends. I think you've seen it at some of the events I've done. I've made memes and we'll rotate them up on the screen. It makes people laugh. It makes them pay attention. People have asked for them. People have reused them. It makes them feel like they're part of it. It makes them feel like they can understand it. The problem with cybersecurity is one of the many problems is people feel like it's too complex and too sophisticated for them to play a role in. And the memes actually help them realize like, oh, so my password does matter. And it's like, yes, we're looking at 90% across the board worldwide cyber incidents that are caused usually by some sort of human error. We've got to get the human beings and the human factors start playing more of a role. Sure, if Russia's going to put 1,000 engineers behind a supply chain hack, that's a tough battle to go up against. But gosh, if we got people, clicking on phishing emails, we don't even stand a chance. So let's take care of the low-hanging fruit first. That's our culture of cybersecurity awareness started with the awareness training, the monthly phishing emails. Then we got into a little bit more of that, the Swedish fish, and who knows what we're going to come up with in the future. But we want them to feel part of the cyber team.
Okay.
Every employee matters.
Yeah.
I never thought about the memes. I always see on LinkedIn. I follow Cybersecurity Hub, who I think they're like they just make memes every day. They're pretty funny.
The CISO director also posts a bunch of memes.
Yeah,
I've seen
that's
hers.
why she loves MFA and see the memes and little things like that. Her T-shirt, Frankie says, "Turn on MFA."
Yeah.
Those little types of things. It helps.
Yeah.
It's just quick hitters to make people start thinking about it, and the little things matter. I mean, the difference of having MFA turned on is like night and day.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I'll consult with like entrepreneurs and like small budding businesses, usually in Scottsdale. And the amount of them, it still just boggles my mind how many like just don't have MFA turned on. It's really not even on the radar.
It's not, and I will candidly tell you when we respond in cyber incidents, it's pretty crazy with the things that we see, and I'll leave it at that.
Can only imagine.
So let's go back. I know we promised a couple stories from the CIA. So were you, Jason, born cranking the gears in Europe somewhere?
No, I wasn't. I hate to disappoint everybody, but I probably wouldn't be here on this podcast talking about it if I had been really cool. So I'm more of like people joke around like desk jockeys and things like that. And I said, hey, happy to do it because it's the coolest desk job I could have ever had. In a meaningful way, you work out of headquarters and places like that, even in an overt, non-undercover, non-covert capacity. You're able to do so because of brave men and women that are risking their lives in covert roles around the world. So, it's not lost on us every day you walk in, you see the stars on the wall. The fact that headquarters had been attacked by a terrorist and officers had been killed while trying to come into the parking lot one day. So the risk, the sacrifices and things like that. But for all intents and purposes, you felt pretty safe being at headquarters. Being at headquarters brought a lot of luxuries as well. You've got people serving in Afghanistan and all places in the deepest, darkest holes in the world to protect this country, and we're complaining because the line at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts within headquarters is too long. It's a pretty good, they talk about hashtag first world problems, it's like hashtag headquarters problems. Like we're complaining because parking lot is too much of an issue. Parking's a huge issue there, and you got to walk, especially in extreme weather, a long ways to get in. Those are good problems to have. But along the way, you got to do some fun things. We played basketball inside our cafeteria. We created a basketball court like during the charity time of year to raise money in the federal campaign. So I played on a basketball team Something I never thought I would do is play basketball inside CIA's cafeteria, especially with Director Panetta there as well. Nothing will make you more nervous to shoot around than when the director of the CIA is there watching you. So that
embarrassing herself with the air balls.
Yeah, exactly. It's not it's not the easiest environment to play basketball in either. And this is solely random, but one of my other coolest experiences is playing basketball at the White House. When I worked at the White House, we were able to play basketball in the president's court that he had converted the tennis court into and also a basketball court. And we were able to play there in a pickup game my first week at the White House. So I was told the night before, I was still kind of training and I was super nervous and highly stressed out. And they said, hey, don't forget after your shift tomorrow, bring a change of clothes. We're going to play basketball on the court. And I was like, we're going to play basketball? That's great. Yeah, let's do it. And they're like, yeah, it's the National Security Council, like the White House team, basically, led by the Deputy Chief of Staff. And others were actually playing against CIA.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fitting because I'm a CIA officer detailed to the White House Situation Room. Man, what a great first week to be down here. And so after my shift, I change into some workout clothes and we all go out there. And I go to the side of the hoop. CIA Acting Director Mike Morrell, who I'm fortunate to have known from my time at headquarters. And I went over and there was about 10 or so people came over from CIA to play this pickup basketball game. Mm-hmm. And I go over there and I start, warming up. Yep. And on the other side of the court, there's like 50 people from the White House because it's obviously at the White House. So everybody just brought their change of clothes. They went right down. They didn't have to come over from Langley. And I hear this, Roemer, what are you doing? And it's like the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm warming up to play the basketball game. He's like, you're on the wrong side. And I said, no, I'm CIA. He's like, yeah, but you're stationed at the White House. And I looked right at Mike Morrell, and I realized this was a career-defining moment for me. And fortunately, I thought really fast on my toes, and I said, no, he still pays my paychecks. And so I stayed on the CIA side, and it was great, too, because we won. So we win. I feel like my career, I'm fortunate I didn't get transferred back to headquarters after it. Really cool story, really fun. Yeah. Really negative impact, though, that everybody on that team called me Benedict Arnold as my nickname for like a 2-year White House rotation. They would see me and be like, oh, there's Benedict Arnold over there. He wouldn't even play on our basketball team. And I always told them, I was like, I'm a CIA employee, that they pay my paychecks. So that was a good day. There's some stressful days work. That was a good day. But boy, I avoided disaster there. It was a fun 10 years.
That's crazy.
So it sounds like everyone at the White House when we were playing basketball was looking to break your ankles after that. Get you to slip up on the court.
Pretty much. Especially like speaking of being nervous. I mean, like you're playing on like the president's basketball court at the White House. Yeah, I mean, like you got adrenaline.
Obama's watching an air ball.
You're convincing yourself that he is, right? Yeah. Like he's looking out from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office out here or something. Yeah. And so, even though that was not reality, it made you think about it a little bit. But no Jason Bourne, and I always get a kick out of watching shows like Jack Ryan and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because Jack Ryan is unbelievable. Like he can go, be a great, shot, taking down terrorists in Afghanistan, and he's like back the next day to brief the president, in the Oval Office. And I'm thinking, man, like this guy does the analytical work, he does the tactical work, he does the briefing work, he does the congressional affairs. I'm like, dude does every job at CIA. It's truly incredible. So in reality, there takes a lot of people in a lot of support role jobs, which I was honored to have, like my time in congressional affairs. Like we would help them brief Congress for them on significant intelligence activities so that they didn't have to break away from their mission to be able to do so. So that was some of the value we added. But it's funny to watch the Hollywood versions where it's the same person in the same role just does every job. It's like, that's why there's broken up into directorates. You've got people that do the analysis, you've got people that do operations, people that do science and technology, people that do support role type stuff. And usually, one person's not doing it all.
Makes sense. So how did you transition from ASU into the CIA?
Early 2000s, CIA and other national security agencies within the intelligence community had a lot of post 9/11 funding to spend. So I like to say that I was in the right place at the right time. Timing is kind of everything. I went to a job fair at ASU's student union, and I saw a CIA booth, and I networked with the young guy there. I networked with him, got to know him. Ended up getting a recommendation for a student trainee, like co-op internship program, and I was so young and naive that I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, that I feel like I passed with flying colors on all of my assessments. And you do a lot of interviews, and the next thing I know, they said, hey, why don't you come to DC, we'll do a few more interviews. I'm like, great, sure, I would love. Sounds like a great trip for a 20-year-old to go on. So I fly out to Dulles and go stay at a hotel in Tyson's Corner and go into a nondescript government building, and the next thing I know, I'm taking polygraphs and psychological analysis and everything. And I'm having a great time, I'm having a ball. And I think it's because I was so young, I just didn't realize what was actually happening, and it helped me relieve the stress and the pressure, because I got it. And what they told me is they recruit people, not majors. And I was a communications and political science major. But they said, hey, we're recruiting you, not your major. We'll teach you how to do everything we want you to do. We just recruit people, and then we train you. Nobody's coming out of school like, I'm ready to be a CIA officer today. I think that's like we see in the movies, like, the Good Shepherd or the Recruit and all these different types of things. And we think, there's, when I talk to people about giving them advice about how to get a job at the CIA, they're always like, what training should I be taking right now? And I'm like, just stay out of trouble and, I don't know, get good grades, find something that suits you well. If they want you, they're going to come after you, or they're going to like you, or, any number of things, but they're not recruiting the major itself. They're not, saying that you're ready to hit the ground running. So it's a lot of training that goes into it. Once I got there, I did assignments at CIA headquarters, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, which is the nation's eyes. National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, which is building, operating, launching into space all of the intelligence satellites. And then after that, about a year of doing that, I converted to full-time staff when I graduated from ASU, and they paid for my senior year at ASU for a 1-year continuation. And then I went in for my reinvestigation on polygraph, reinvestigation on psych, everything. And it was way more stressful. Because then I knew what I was doing. Then I had they're asking you a lot of questions, and you've been in the chair before, you've been there, and boy, that one was way harder. I will tell you. So yeah, when people say, how did you do it? I always say I had good timing. I was smart enough to ask for jobs that, what's the worst thing they can do is say no. Right. And that truly helped. And I think because I, was a little young and naive, it kind of helped me take away the pressure of like, what happens if I don't get this? It was like, well, what happens if I don't get this? At the original time, I was like, I'm just going to go on vacation with my friends in San Diego or Las Vegas next week. Like, I'll be okay. I think as an adult, we put so much pressure on ourselves for these jobs. But once upon a time, my entire career was launched in an internship. And that's why our internship program within the Department of Homeland Security is such a pet project of mine. And I've got great employees that have run with it now. But when I first came in, we had 1 intern, and now we've got 5. And I want to stretch it to 10. And I've told everybody, I'm like, this is how you recruit and retain talent. This is the talent pipeline problem, the workforce development problem, the problem in government when people say we can't afford to recruit good cyber talent. Start younger. Bring in people that are currently getting their degrees. Bring them out of high school. I don't need an Ivy League education to do this. I need somebody who has a certificate in security architecture who can come in day one and do it. I need somebody who can do an internship as a SOC analyst and help my SOC team tomorrow. So the internship program is a huge passion of mine and our team. We've developed some really good talent from it. We recruited some good interns. We trained them well. They did well, and they converted to full-time staff. That's awesome. A way that we've been able to afford good talent. And I think it's a recipe for success that we'd like to drive home and be more of a model for. So that's a little bit of taking my background and kind of turning it into a solution or a win for our modern problems and challenges.
Absolutely.
So before we end, kind of off of that, so I think one of the biggest shortages has been around the very niche, but been around the IoT and some of the industrial control systems and operational technology security. I think I've read there's only somewhere around like 1,000 in the U.S. that are qualified to do that. How do you make up for a gap like that where it's so specialized and also so important?
Private sector solutions. We're not going to be able to develop those types of solutions in-house. I actually just spoke at an event for Clarity, and it's a company that specializes in this, and they've recently partnered with CrowdStrike on helping to secure the entire IoT apparatus. Huge concern. That's where even your largest companies like CrowdStrike need help from other innovative solutions and creating it in order to help them and to help all of their clients and customers as well. So I look at this in government, in the public sector, as being, I know kind of what the challenges are, but I need to find good partners in the private sector to help me achieve the actual solutions. If people think you're going to be in government and you're going to run like your own R&D and you're going to develop solutions, all that type of stuff, you're not. First of all, it's not a good use of your time and resources and money. It's not a good use of taxpayer dollars. Taxpayer dollars should be, especially at the state level, be going to known quantities that have proven to be effective. You have a limited budget. I need to be using my budget on things that I know are going to be effective day one. Not boy, I hope this tool works, let's give it a shot. No. The private sector is already developing all that. Also, at the state level, we rarely ever go with a vendor that we didn't do a free proof of concept or proof of value first to prove that it works, doesn't mess up any of our systems, and then we go to the legislature or we compete it in an RFP. But we have to have proof that it actually works first and foremost.
Okay. So you've been pretty open about cybersecurity, advocating for information sharing. If people want to find you and get more insights, where can they find you? I'm guessing probably not on TikTok.
No, not on TikTok, that's for sure. So our Department of Homeland Security, our entire department knows that I am very public. I think that we need to be, because we talked about a culture of cybersecurity awareness. How can we do it if we're sitting in our offices all day and we're afraid to go out and talk about it? So you can actually find any local cybersecurity event within the state of Arizona, not just Phoenix, but we do road shows to rural Arizona and all over the state. All you've got to be is, paying attention to, local cybersecurity events, and you're more than likely going to run into the Department of Homeland Security there. That's not just a talking point, because the reason why I'm on this podcast right now is I've run into you at several events. And so I think my actions speak louder than my words, that if you're interested in this industry and that you want to work with us and partner and collaborate, this is the perfect example on this podcast with you all today. Saw you at events, got to know you at events, talked with you, you asked. Most important question, right? Like, hey, will you do this? Can we come by? I said yes, we made it happen. I think a lot of people will be surprised how often you can engage with our department around the state. We're not shy. And we will say yes to, speak at a lot of events and help you as much as we can. We're all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely.